There was a period in my life not so long ago where I thought I was doing everything right in order to manifest. And I mean everything. I journal what I wanted to manifest every single morning and every single night. I visualized every night before dropping off to sleep. I scripted my desire in the present tense over and over until the words practically wrote themselves. I cleared my limiting beliefs, or so I thought. I acted as if it was mine, even though the people around me really thought I was crazy. I spoke affirmations to myself in the mirror, even when I didn't quite believe them yet. And still, absolutely nothing. Well, not nothing exactly. Things were happening, but not the specific things I wanted. And I remember lying awake at 2 a.m, running through every possibility of how my desire would arrive. I'd think of one path and then I'd think of another path, and then I'd try to figure out which one the universe was going to use. I'd catch myself rehearsing conversations that hadn't even happened yet, planning for contingencies that didn't exist yet, trying to work out in advance exactly how this thing was going to show up in my life, how I thought. I was exhausted, not physically, exhausted in that deep, invisible way where your mind never actually switches off because it's always quietly working the problem. And looking back now, I can see exactly where I was. I was stuck in the middle stages of the manifestation map. Old beliefs were surfacing, doors were closing that I thought should be opening, and relationships were shifting. Every day felt like a small test I hadn't studied for, and every time I thought I'd finally cleared something, I'd loop straight back around again, like I was walking the same corridor, walking the same path, expecting a different door to appear. And I remember thinking quite seriously, am I doing everything the teachers teach me to do? What am I doing wrong? Like, why isn't this working? There was one week in particular that summed up the whole experience. I had a dream about my desire arriving in a specific way. So naturally, I decided that was the sign. That was the how. And for the next few days, I unconsciously started steering my choices around making that exact version happen. When a completely different opportunity showed up, one that could easily have led me to that same outcome, I didn't take that route. I hesitated because part of me dismissed it almost without realizing, because it didn't match the particular picture I decided on. I wasn't open to receiving it. I was too busy working out the version that I had prepared, that I had approved in my mind. Looking back, that was such a perfect example of what I mean by this paradox. I wasn't lacking desire. I wasn't lacking belief. Well, most days anyway. What I was doing was quietly refusing anything that didn't arrive through the specific channels I'd mentally assigned to it. And then, one evening, almost by accident, I had the realization that changed everything. I wasn't stuck because manifestation wasn't working. I was stuck because I had quietly, unconsciously confused two very different jobs. I thought that because that I had the power to choose my desired outcome, I also had the responsibility and the power to control how it arrived. Those are not the same thing, not even close. And once I saw that distinction, I couldn't unsee it. It didn't just explain why I'd been stuck. It explained the entire architecture of the manifestation journey, the whole 8-stage process I'd already spent years documenting. Suddenly the stages I'd mapped out made sense in a completely new way. So that's what I want to walk through today with you. Not just the paradox itself, but why it's the exact thing that traps so many of us in stage 3 and stage 4, sometimes for months, even years, sometimes looping back through them again and again. And what actually shifts when you finally understand it. Thanks for watching, liking, commenting, and subscribing, which helps my videos reach and help more people. If you'd like to learn how to map manifestation through my unique 8-stage mapping manifestation framework, go to my website, www.melindamulcahy.com, and book your place on my free live 45-minute workshop. The paradox. So here's the contradiction that trips almost everyone up at some point. Well, it tripped me up, certainly. We're taught that we create our reality, that our beliefs matter, that our thoughts matter, our energy matters. We're told to take responsibility, to decide, to act, to claim what we want, because we are creators. But then, in almost the same breath, we're told to surrender, to let go, to stop trying to control the outcome, to trust the process. Can you see the problem here? I mean, which is it? Do I create my reality or does the universe? I'm confused. For years, I genuinely couldn't reconcile those two ideas. They felt like they were cancelling one another out. But they're not opposites. They're two different jobs operating in two completely different domains. Your job is just to choose. The universe's job is just to deliver. Now, to emphasize this particular point, I want to give you the simplest example that I know of. If you want to win the lottery, yes, of course, you have to buy a ticket, right? That's action. That's your responsibility. You can't just sit at home wishing for it and expect a winning lottery ticket to simply just appear in your pocket. That's not how it works. If you want your book published, then yes, you have to actually write it and submit it somewhere. Now, I'm not saying that desire without any action goes nowhere, because let me tell you, I've experienced plenty of manifestations where I desired something and it arrived 2 hours later. For instance, I wanted to go to a marketing event which was for 3 days and it was on the other side of the UK. The tickets were really, really expensive, and on top of that, I'd have to pay for travel and accommodation as well. So all I said was, I wonder how I'll get the tickets. And within a couple of hours, I'm not kidding, someone posted in a group chat that I was on offering 2 free tickets to that event. That's manifestation. And yes, it's that magical. My only job was to respond to the text message, and voila, I got 2 tickets completely for free. So then I texted another friend of mine who I also knew wanted to go, and I offered her the ticket. And guess what? She booked the accommodation and I drove. It was that easy. But you see, because we live in a physical world, it often requires physical participation. So yes, action matters. Inspired, aligned action taking is absolutely part of the process. But here's the part nobody separates out properly. Buying the ticket is not the same as deciding which numbers get pulled out of the machine, the lottery machine. Writing the book is not the same as deciding which publisher says yes, which editor happens to be looking for exactly your particular story that particular week, or which agent picks your submission out of the enormous slush pile at exactly the right moment. That part, the how, was never yours to control. It belongs to a web of people, timing, decisions, and circumstances so vast that no human mind could consciously orchestrate it, even if you tried for the rest of your life. You just can't do it. Could you control who decides to buy the house you want to sell so that you can move? Of course not. Just like who changes jobs and opens up the exact role you're hoping for. Or which stranger mentions your name in a conversation you'll never even know took place. Which editor happens to read your book submission on the one day they're in the right mood for it. You see? Of course not. And this is exactly where I went wrong, and where I think so many people trying to manifest are going wrong too. I understand that I got to choose the desire. What I hadn't understood was that choosing the destination and steering every mile of the journey are 2 entirely different roles. I'd claimed the outcome, and then, without even noticing, I'd quietly appointed myself the project manager of how it and when it would arrive. So we get fixated on the how, which path it will take, which door it will open, what it will look like when it finally shows up, not to mention when it will actually arrive. And the tighter we grip that question, the more resistance we create, because we're trying to consciously manage something that was only ever meant to be released. And so here's the phrase that changed things for me. The desire is the how. Once you've decided what you want and you've taken action within your power, responded to the text message, written the submission for the book, put yourself in the room, your job is essentially done. Not forever, but for now. The next part isn't yours to manage. It's yours to release. And that is the entire paradox in one sentence. You have complete control over what you choose. You have almost no control over how and when it arrives. And the moment you try to do both, you don't speed up your manifestation, you slow it down because you're pouring your energy into a job that was never yours to do in the first place. Does that make sense? Now, here's why I wanted to bring in the 8 stages today, because this isn't just a nice idea. It's the exact mechanism behind why so many people get completely stuck partway through their manifestation journey, sometimes circling the same stages for months, even years. Just quickly so that you got the map. Manifestation, when there is real resistance to move through, tends to unfold across 8 recognizable stages. Activation, that's your desire. Calibration is your decision. Clearing, now this is where old beliefs surface. Surrender, where the old identity dissolves. The void, where everything goes quiet. Stabilization, when everything starts to settle. Momentum, obviously things start to visibly respond. And coherence, where the manifestation drops because you and your desire become a match. Now, most people move through the first 2 stages fairly easily, like when you've finally decided what you want and there's a real buzz to that. And it feels almost magical because you're suddenly seeing your desire everywhere you look. Your brain's filtering system, the part of the brain that decides what's worth your attention, has been told this matters. So it starts showing you evidence of it constantly. But then you take a dip. Suddenly things start to feel uncomfortable. This is the stage where old beliefs surface. You might notice doors starting to close instead of opening. Relationships shifting, sometimes ending. Financial pressure, you're in a scarcity mindset, and beneath it all, a quiet nagging question. Can I really have this? Here's what I now understand about this particular stage, and it's the piece that would have saved me months, if not years, of frustration if I'd have known sooner. Every uncomfortable thing that shows up isn't a test to prove you're worthy. It's an invitation. It's showing you the exact belief that's standing between who you are now and who you need to be capable of receiving what it is you've asked for. And this is precisely where the paradox does its damage, because most of us instinctively respond to discomfort by tightening our grip. We try to control harder, to do more, to fix, to force the outcome into place through sheer effort and force, because that's what that discomfort tends to trigger us to do, to urge us to do something about it. But this particular part of your manifestation journey was never asking you to control the outcome more tightly. It was asking you to look honestly at what still believes you can't have it. And that's an inward job, not an outward job. And so when we respond to an inward invitation with an outward force, we don't resolve it. We just loop back. We clear one layer of the belief, feel a bit of a relief, and then find ourselves right back in the same emotional territory a few weeks later, wondering why it's happened again. That looping isn't failure, by the way. It's incredibly common, and it doesn't mean manifestation has stopped working for you. It usually just means that there's just another layer of belief sitting underneath that is not in alignment with the person who is capable of having your desired outcome. Think about it a bit like peeling an onion, except the onion is your nervous system's entire history of feeling safe. You clear the belief that you're not good enough, and a few weeks later, something happens that makes you question whether you deserve this at all. You clear that, and then a fear about visibility shows up, and then a fear about what happens if it all goes wrong once you actually have it turns up. And of course, each layer feels like it's the final one, that you've overcome something monumentally big internally, but it rarely is. And if you don't understand that looping is simply part of the mechanism, it's incredibly easy to interpret it as evidence that something is broken. But really, it's evidence that something is working exactly as it should be. This is why the phrase, "you are exactly where you're meant to be," makes perfect sense. I want to say that again because I think it's one of the most important things that I've come to understand in the 14 years I've been studying manifestation. Looping back through this cleansing stage or clearing stage doesn't mean you've failed a test. Contrary to what other manifestation teachers tell you, there is no test. You are not being tested. It just means that your higher self keeps compassionately handing you the next invitation, layer by layer, at exactly the pace you can actually integrate it. Because if it handed you everything all at once, it would overwhelm the nervous system rather than heal it. So then comes stage 4, which I call surrender. And this is where the paradox becomes almost unbearable if you haven't understood it yet. By this point, a lot of what needs to be surfaced has surfaced. Some of it you've already released, but the identity that's been running your life, sometimes for decades, starts genuinely dissolving here. And your nervous system does not like it one little bit. It spent years organizing itself around predictability. Predictability to your nervous system equals safety. So when the old familiar version of you starts loosening its grip, your nervous system reads that as danger, even though that's exactly what it needs to progress. I've come to realize that your nervous system can actually override your own free will. Now, this is the stage a lot of spiritual traditions have called the dark night of the soul. And believe me, I understand why. It can feel like everything you built is slowly but surely falling apart. Confidence disappears. The excitement from earlier stages feels like a distant memory. You might start wondering if you've failed, if you've done something wrong, if manifestation was ever real to begin with. This is the exact moment where the paradox either sets you free or keeps you trapped. If you don't understand it, this stage feels like proof that you need to try harder, to grip tighter, to work more, to control more, because everything in you is telling you something is going wrong and your instinct is to fix it. But if you do understand the paradox, this stage reveals itself for what it actually is. It was never asking you to control your way out of the discomfort. It was inviting you to surrender the illusion that you were ever meant to control the how in the first place. I'm not talking about surrendering your desire. I'm talking about surrendering to the belief you have to personally orchestrate every event required to bring a manifestation to you. I think this is the single most misunderstood stage in the entire manifestation process because so many teachers describe it as a test of your resolve. Are you worthy enough? Do you want it badly enough? Have you proven yourself? I don't believe that's what's happening at all. You see, a test asks to prove something. An invitation simply assumes you're already worthy and gently shows you everything still standing in the way of you believing that for yourself. That's a completely different energy to sit inside of. And once I reframed it that way, the whole stage stopped feeling like a punishment and started feeling like exactly what it was. The most honest, most necessary part of the entire journey. Once I understood that distinction, something in me finally exhaled. I stopped trying to calculate which path my desire was going to take. I stopped catastrophizing potential problems that were snatching my manifestation away from me. I stopped lying awake at night trying to solve a puzzle that was never mine to solve. I'd claimed the outcome. I'd taken the action available to me, and the rest, the who, the when, the exact sequence of events belonged to something far bigger than my little conscious mind could even manage. And by the way, that's not giving up. It's simply handing over the job back to whoever was actually meant to be doing it, the universe. So what happens after you let go? Once that grip genuinely loosens, something shifts. And it's usually not dramatic at first, it's quiet. You move into what I call the void. And this is where most people panic if they don't know what's coming, because everything goes silent. It's like tumbleweed. The signs just slow down, in fact, often disappear. You can feel like the universe has simply stopped responding. But that silence isn't abandonment. Think about it like a good teacher. At the start, they stand right by your side, correcting every single step. Eventually, they step back, not because they've given up on you, but because you've become capable. I believe manifestation works in a similar manner. As your identity becomes more capable with what you've asked for, the constant reassurance naturally fades because you no longer need it in the same way. Something else tends to happen here too that surprises people. You start to notice that you don't feel quite as desperate about the outcome anymore. You might even catch yourself thinking, I don't really mind whether this happens or not. At first, that can feel alarming, like you're losing interest, or worse, giving up. But actually the opposite's happening. The version of you that needed this manifestation to feel whole has already changed. You're no longer chasing it to complete yourself. You've become more complete without it, which strangely is usually right around the point it starts moving again. From there, life starts moving faster, quietly at first, where opportunities begin to become more present. Opportunities that once seemed completely absent begin appearing. The right people show up at the right time. And the striking part is how little effort it takes compared to before, because the version of you capable of receiving this reality has actually arrived. You're not performing confidence or even gratitude anymore. You just have it. So then the outer world genuinely starts to reflect the internal change. People comment on how different you seem, calmer, somehow lighter. Opportunities stop trickling in and start arriving with real frequency. And there's often this unexpected wave of gratitude that shows up here too. Not the kind you force yourself to feel because you know it's a manifestation tool to use, but the real kind, the kind that catches you off guard watching a sunset or noticing a bird landing nearby. And if you stay aligned, finally, you will experience what I call the drop down. This is the moment your subconscious, your nervous system, and your conscious mind all finally agree. You stop wondering whether it's going to happen. You simply know it's already yours, even before it physically appears. And so when it finally does show up, it rarely feels like a surprise. It feels strangely, quietly familiar. Because in every way that matters, you've already become the person who it belongs to. This is why I tell my clients, what you love loves you too. And looking back at the whole arc from activation right through to the drop down, what strikes me most isn't any single stage. It's how perfectly the paradox threads through every single one of those stages. Activation and calibration are almost entirely about you taking control, deciding, claiming, and commitment. Clearing and surrender, on the other hand, are about releasing the part of you that were never meant to control in the first place. The void is the space where that release finally starts to settle, and stabilization, momentum, and coherence are simply what naturally unfolds once you've stopped interfering with the process that was working all along. So let's bring it back together. Here's what I want you to take away from all of this. The paradox at the center of manifestation isn't actually a contradiction. It only looks like one because we've been taught to believe that creating and controlling are the same job, but they're not. Your responsibility is to choose, to decide clearly what you want, to take the action that's necessary and genuinely available to you by buying the ticket, by writing the book, walking through the door that's right in front of you. That part is yours, and no one else can do it for you. But how it arrives, the timing, the people, the place, the exact sequence of events that bring it to you. That was never your job. It belongs to something far greater than any of us can consciously track. The moment that you stop trying to force your way through and instead start asking what they're actually inviting you to release changes everything. Not because the universe suddenly starts working differently, but because you finally stop fighting the part of the process that was designed to set you free. I wish someone had told me this years ago. It would have saved me so many sleepless nights trying to solve a puzzle that was never mine to solve. And so if you've ever found yourself stuck exactly where I was, doing everything right and still feeling like nothing was moving, I promise you it doesn't mean it's not working. It doesn't mean that your manifestation is not meant to be. It might just mean you're standing right in the middle of stage 3 and stage 4, being invited to let go of something you've been gripping far too tightly. So tell me in the comments, which stage do you think that you're in right now? I would genuinely love to know, and I read every single comment. And if this video resonates, please like, subscribe, and click the bell button to receive notifications of new content. Also, if you're interested to learn the stages of manifestation, I have a free 1-hour workshop. So go to my website, melindamulcahy.com, for more details. And always remember, the universe says yes. Are you saying yes to you?